Pinchas, Rabbi Landis, thank you very much. As I said, a man of Ruach. So now it's my honor to introduce another good friend and also another longtime, very committed leader in our Jewish community, the incoming board chair of Partners in Torah, Bill Heller.
Thank you, David. Thank you, David and Hetty. And I just want to add, before I introduce our keynote speaker, I want to add my mazel tov to Dina, to Rabbi and Nomi Landis for all the wonderful work that you've done, to all of you who have been such loyal supporters to Partners in Torah and are with us this evening to learn what you can do going forward and to be sure that we strengthen Partners in Torah. And a few years from now, we have to have a room twice this size to have all our supporters at our annual event. I also want to say a mazel tov and thank you to our past board chair. David was really the inspiration for me beginning to study Torah. This was before Partners in Torah, but David started before I did and was really an inspiration for me to get started. And I just want to say that his mother and I are very proud of him. Thank you. It's my honor this evening to introduce our keynote speaker, Rabbi Frand. Rabbi Frand is one of the most sought-out Jewish lecturers of our time. His blend of Torah scholarship, humor, eloquence, passion, and sensitivity is unmatched. As a Rosh Yeshiva at Baltimore's Yeshivas Ner Yisrael, Rabbi Frand educates hundreds of students and inspires them to hold aloft the beacon light of Torah to a searching Jewish world. He is a noted author and orator of biblical commentary, who has written extensively for Art Scroll, and tape CDs and MP3s of his inspiring words can be found on every continent and enjoyed by Jews of all backgrounds and levels. Rabbi Frand has been invited to speak all over the world. He's been a keynote speaker at the conventions of Agudat Yisrael of America and Torah Umasora, and at the 11th Siyum Hashas of Daf Yomi, Rabbi Frand electrified the more than 100,000 participants with his portrayal of our obligation to study Torah, which is particularly relevant to Partners in Torah. It's never too little, it's never too late, and it's never enough. Among his many books published by Art Scroll is his series, Rabbi Frand on Parsha, which has been referred to earlier this evening. And among them also is a hard copy of his message, It's Never Too Little, It's Never Too Late, and It's Never Enough, which I ordered and I'm looking forward to reading as soon as it's received in the next day or two. Rabbi Frand's message, keenly attuned to the needs of his audience and the state of Kalal Yisrael, is always timely and timeless. I'm pleased to present to you Rabbi Frand. Rabbi, welcome to Cleveland, and we're all looking forward to hearing from you.
Thank you very much. Mazel tov on your new assignment.
Thank you.
Have a lot of mazel hatzlacha.
Thank you.
So let me begin by thanking the Hellers, both father and son. Thank you for the plug for my books. That always helps. And as Rabbi Landis mentioned, it is customary to always begin by thanking the hosts. My host for tonight is Rabbi Landis. And I must say, I do this quite often, and I deal with people trying to bring me in to different venues, and some are better than others. Rabbi Landis is the gold standard. He did this with military precision, and maybe he missed his calling. He should have been in charge of D-Day. This is not scientific, but the word on the street, at least the Jewish street, is that Cleveland is on the upswing. And more families are coming into Cleveland, and it's just, as the driver who brought me here tonight says, it's a happening city. So I think that's true, and certainly it's true with the Cleveland Browns. You know, as a fan of the Baltimore Ravens, I always looked for how to turn off your audience in threes. I always would pencil in, oh, that's a win against Cleveland. But with the arrival of Baker Mayfield, I don't know anymore. I had to get that in. I want to begin perhaps echoing what Rabbi Landis said in different words. There was a yeshiva bocher, a person who had learned in yeshiva before the Holocaust in Europe. He survived the Holocaust. He made his way to what was then Palestine. He came to the city in Bnei Brak, very famous city in Israel, and there was a yeshiva that was started there by Rabbi Yosef Shlomo Kahaneman, who we'll talk about later on in this speech. So he wanted to enter the yeshiva, wanted to be accepted as a student. Like in most yeshivas, you have to undergo an entrance exam. Do you know how to study? Do you know how to learn? What have you learned? So here's a Holocaust survivor, and Rav Kahaneman, the Rosh Hashiva, asks him, what did you learn before the Holocaust? And he said he learned a tractate, he learned a section of the Talmud called Elu Trefus, which is one of the most complex concepts, chapters in the Talmud. It deals with the anatomy of a cow, what makes it kosher, what makes it treif. And he remembered what he learned. And the Ponevezher Rav Kahaneman was amazed. He was a kid that went through the Holocaust, and he still remembers his learning. He took him by the hand. And the Ponevezher Rav Kahaneman ran through the streets of Bnei Brak, and he came to the home of the Chazon Ish, who was arguably the greatest Talmudic scholar in Israel at that time. And he says, this boy is an embodiment and a personification of a verse in the Torah that says, Ki lo yishokach mipi zarai. Torah will never be forgotten. Come what may, Holocaust, pogroms, whatever may be, lo yishokach mipi zarai, Torah will never be forgotten. And here he is, this boy personifies that. Shortly thereafter, the Ponevezher Rav says, but there's a corollary to that pasuk. That pasuk is a promise. It won't be forgotten, come what may. But that verse is also a challenge. And the challenge is that we have to make sure the Torah will never be forgotten. Yes, it's a promise, but it's a challenge to us as well. And there's ample historical precedent to this concept that everyone has to take the responsibility upon himself. I have to make sure, at least in my small way, to make sure the Torah will not be forgotten. The Talmud tells us of one of the great sages of the Talmud. His name was Rabbi Chia, that he went and said, Ano avda, Anavdi loti mishtachach Torah b'Yisrael. I am going to make sure the Torah shouldn't be forgotten. And what this great sage of the Talmud do? He went ahead and he took 5 little children and he taught them the 5 books of Moses. And he took 6 other children and he taught them the 6 volumes of the Talmud. And he says, now teach them to others and others to others. And this way I did my part. L'tishtachach Torah b'Yisrael. The Talmud tells us about someone named Rabbi Yeshua ben Gamla, who actually was the father of the day school movement in Talmudic times. Because it used to be the way Torah was taught. It was taught from father to son, from father to son, from father to son. But he saw a situation that there were not always fathers teaching their children Torah. Either the fathers didn't know, or there were no fathers, they were orphans. So he started a radical thing. He said everybody has to go to cheder, to day school. Whether you have a father or not, everyone has to do. And if one could make the comparison, as Horace Mann was the founder of the public school movement of the United States, Rabbi Yeshua ben Gamla was the founder of Torah day schools in all of Israel. And there is no better example of this concept of I have to do what I have to do to make sure that Torah isn't forgotten than right here in Cleveland, Ohio. But in order to know the background to that story, we have to go to a little history of the yeshiva that many of you, I'm sure, are familiar with, and that's the Telzer Yeshiva. The Nazis invaded Lithuania in June of 1941. It didn't take them long to begin destroying the Jews of Lithuania and the whole world of Torah that existed in that country. On July 15th, 1941, corresponding to the 20th day of Tammuz, they wiped out the entire Telzer Yeshiva. The Rosh Yeshivas, the teachers, the rabbis, and the students, everyone. And in September, they wiped out all the women and children. I stood in what remains of the Telz Yeshiva in Lithuania, in the city of Telz. The walls literally are coming apart. And to think that in this building, there was so much Torah learned, wiped out, slaughtered. But God has his ways of protecting Torah and making sure that Torah isn't forgotten. While this was happening, the Telz Yeshiva sent over 2 of its rabbis to the United States of America to collect funds for the Telz Yeshiva. Those 2 rabbis were Rav Elia Meir Bloch and Rabbi Mordechai Katz. They lost their entire families. They came here to collect money. I'm originally from Seattle, Washington. And I saw a picture, it was then a paper in Seattle, the Seattle Post-Intelligencer, 2 Lithuanian rabbis come to America. They came to Cleveland, having lost their families. And they rebuilt the Telzer Yeshiva. Do you know what it means for a person to have such personal devastation and to pick himself up and say, we can't let this happen, we have to rebuild? I once heard that a student once walked into the office of Rabbi Mottel Katz on a regular day, and he saw him crying. The student asked, Rashiva, Rebbe, why are you crying? And he says, because I had 10 children in Europe, and I'm beginning to forget their names. But what motivated them? What motivated Rabbi Bloch? And what motivated Rabbi Katz? It was that verse in the Torah, the promise and the challenge. Ki lo yishakach mipi zarei. And that's a challenge that applies to each and every generation. Because situations and circumstances arise that require action and reaction. Other generations have to deal with catastrophes. We in the United States of America, from the latter part of the 20th century, we don't have to deal with a catastrophe. We have to deal with a bracha, a blessing. And that blessing is called the Baal Tshuva movement. Approximately 20 years after the end of the Holocaust, there began a revolution among the people of Israel. It started as a trickle, and eventually became a torrent. People began searching for spirituality in their lives to make their lives more meaningful. There are many theories as to why this happened, why this awakening. Some say that the 1.5 million children that were murdered in the Holocaust, their souls came back down to this earth in the persons of different people, and they were searching because this is what they missed when their lives were cut short. Others attribute it to the Six-Day War and the good feelings that engendered in those days. But whatever the reason, there are now thousands of people who are spiritually thirsty. And it is everyone's obligation to try to quench that thirst. This is part of the legacy of the first patriarch, Abraham. The first patriarch, Abraham, there were yeshivas even before Abraham. But Abraham created a yeshiva. And you know what was the difference between his yeshiva and the yeshiva of Shem, Ve'ever, and others? Because Abraham was not satisfied to teach the kids in his four walls of the shul. He branched out. That's the legacy of Avraham Avinu, to bring people closer to God. In those days, it was non-Jews, but he created non-Jews. He made them into converts, because that's a legacy of Jews. You have to bring people closer to God. You know, whenever you try to inspire people to take action, to do something, you have to use sometimes an incentive. Sometimes the incentive can be a carrot. Sometimes the incentive can be a stick. Tonight I'm going to offer you both, a carrot and a stick. The Talmud tells us that one who teaches the child of someone whose father could not teach him Torah, a father who was far away from Judaism and could never teach him his own son Torah, and you teach him, God makes you a promise. And that promise is in effect, you write the check, I'll sign it. Who doesn't want that? Whatever you want, the Rebbeinu Shalom, God will give you. A carte blanche to those who return his children. And here's somewhat of a stick. We began talking about the Ponevezher Rav Yosef Shlomo Kahaneman. Besides being a tremendous Talmid Chacham and scholar, he was one of the great builders of Torah in Israel. If you're ever in Israel and you go to Bnei Brak, as I did a couple of years ago, I just walked into that base midrash of the Ponevezher Yeshiva with its gold Oren Kodesh and boys plugging away in the middle of a Saturday night winter. Besides all of that, he was a prolific fundraiser. He could get money out of a stone. He traveled all over, to South Africa, to South America, to America. At his funeral, someone got up and asked or explained, what motivated him? He lost his family during the Holocaust. He came to Israel a broken man. What motivated him? So the person who delivered the eulogy mentioned a very interesting medrash. The Medrash says that Noah, said to Moshe Rabbeinu, said to Moses, Ani gadol mimcha, I'm greater than you, Moses, because I was saved from the flood. And Moses responds and says, no, I'm greater than you. Because not only did I save myself, I saved my generation. And then the Medrash goes on to say a parable about two captains of a ship. And both ships were going down. And one captain saved himself, but the passenger all perished. The other captain saved himself and saved the passenger as well. Says the Medrash, who's greater than whom? The one who saved himself, and he saved his generation. And that's what Moshe Rabbeinu can say. None of us want to go up to heaven after 120 years and have to answer the question that God is going to ask every one of us. What did you do to make sure the Torah is not forgotten? How are you going to answer that question? One way you can answer that question is through partners in Torah. That's the stick. I don't want to have to answer and say, gee, I don't know what I did. I didn't do anything. I did something. Maybe I'm not Rabbi Bloch, maybe I'm not Rabbi Katz, and maybe I'm not Rabbi Kahaneman. But I did something. I would be remiss if 2.5 weeks before Shavuos, if I didn't say something about the holiday of Shavuos. Everyone here, I'm sure, can say, what's the takeaway message of Passover? You eat matzah, you remember the exodus from Egypt. What's Rosh Hashanah about? It's the Day of Judgment. What's Yom Kippur about? It's the Day of Atonement. What's Shavuos? Besides cheesecake, what is Shavuos? So the passage in the Talmud that I think encapsulates Shavuos to me is a statement that's made by one of the scholars of the Talmud. His name was Rabbi Yosef. And he says, Ilav hayom kagorim. If not for this day of Shavuos, Kama Yosef Ika Beshuka, I'd be just another Joe. But because of this holiday of Shavuos, and we got the Torah transformed me. And I'm a different person. And without that Torah, I'd be a Joe Sixpack. No more. That statement uttered by the sage of a Talmud was written in the 5th or 6th century. I don't know what society looked like then, but I know what society in America looks in 2019. And I want to tell you, I'm afraid for America. I grew up in the 50s and 60s when television was kosher, when movies were kosher, when life was wholesome. Wholesome. I saw a cartoon recently in the magazine The Week, and 2 children are watching some woman performer, woman singer. One says to the other, what does the word wholesome mean? America is a disaster. You know, I'm an American. I love America. But you just walk the streets, you turn the radio on. Why do you think there's an opioid crisis in this country? Why are thousands of people dying every day? Because their lives are empty. There's nothing to live for, there's nothing to do, so you drug yourself out of existence. I grew up in a time where there was a family structure, where when people were polite, when there was civility among people. And now it's so coarse. And on the flight here from Baltimore, there was one man on the entire plane that looked like me, in that he was wearing a suit. And he was actually very well, a three-piece suit, the whole 9 yards. Everybody else, I'm sitting next to a girl, her jeans are ripped. Would someone explain to me why people want that? Why you pay money for you to have your jeans ripped, pre-ripped? You look how people dress, you look how people talk, you look how people act. And I can say the same thing that Rav Yosef said. Yilav hayom et hakagorim, if not for the Torah, I'd be just like the rest of them. That's what Shavuos is about. And that's what Torah is about. And that's why Shavuos is this magnificent holiday, because it gives us life and it gives us purpose. We don't have to ask ourselves in the morning, what on earth am I getting up for? That's why we celebrate Shavuos. And that is why Partners in Torah is such a magnificent organization, because it provides the opportunity and the vehicle for those with a Torah background to answer the question that we will all be asked: what did you do to save your generation? Perhaps you don't feel you'd have the time, you don't have the talents, the ability to teach others personally. But at the very least, you can provide the financial support that Partners in Torah needs. And for those who don't have a Torah background, Partners in Torah gives you the greatest gift that was ever given to mankind. By the greatest being. The Torah was given by God Almighty to us. The greatest gift given by the greatest giver. Don't let that opportunity slip through your hands. Good night.
So I now invite you, there's dessert served downstairs in the lobby. I don't know if there's anything left at our food stations. If there is, you could check that out, but dessert is downstairs. Thank you very much.